Thanks for joining us on today's episode. This is our joy to be with you. Thanks for tuning in. If this is your first time, welcome. Welcome to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
We're glad you're here. Pull up a chair or continue with your dishes or commuting or whatever happens to be going on.
And I think that I'm excited about this episode just because the last episode, it was very clear that this was a very pressing topic and something that's very important.
From a lot of folks about this.
From a lot of families. They really want to know what we think about this, and parents are desperate for ideas. And so I think we set a good foundation last episode, and we want to continue giving some more practical advice on this time around.
That's right. And for those who are new to the Messy Family Project, this is obviously our podcast, but we do a lot of other things in addition to the podcast. And as we are preparing for summer, one of the things we have been doing for the last couple of years is we're encouraging you to start the summer right and join in the Play and Pray Challenge.
Play and pray,
Because if you want to pray with your kids, you need to play with them first.
That's right.
And so what we encourage is for you
to do... What is the Play and Pray Challenge, Mike?
Well, I'm glad you asked. We do this at the beginning of the summer because we think, one, it's a great time to get your priorities right, get habits for the summertime, because it's always a change of schedule. But it's also June is the month of the Sacred Heart.
Yes.
And what we propose and what we challenge you with is to do three simple things, three things that should be part of your life, but maybe it's like getting, knocking the dust off or getting the wheels turning again in your family life. The three most important things are having a date night with your spouse, having a family fun day, and then enthroning Jesus as the king of your home, enthroning the Sacred Heart in your home. And we, if you sign up for it, we'll send you a free download that gives you tons of ideas for date nights, tons of ideas for family fun days on all kinds of budget, as well as a simple formula to either consecrate your family to the Sacred Heart, dedicate your family to the Sacred Heart, or renew that consecration.
And we actually, this year for the first time, took that download and made it into a handy-dandy booklet.
That's right.
And for a donation of any size, we will happily send you the booklet if you register for the Play and Pray Challenge. I mean, we would love to send it out for free, but we had to pay to have it printed, and we're gonna have to pay to mail it and everything. So we'd love to send you that booklet, or you can just get the PDF download for free. But if you register at messyfamilyproject.org, then we will send everybody who registers a beautiful Our Family Did the Play and Pray Challenge sticker. I'm going like this because it's a circle. So we don't know that because I don't have it here. I wish I had to show you. But anyway, so we'll send you the sticker, and it's just encouraging to know that there's hundreds and thousands of families who are doing the Play and Pray Challenge.
And we care about your family that so much that we actually have asked a bunch of priests to say Mass for all those who sign up. So by signing up, your name will be entered into the roll that we share with a whole bunch of priests who are going to say Mass for those families who are doing the Play and Pray Challenge. So sign up at messyfamilyproject.org and you can get free download resources, as well as if you wanted the printed book, as well as get your free sticker and Mass said for the intentions of your family specifically.
Yes.
All right.
So, we've, in the last couple episodes or during this year, during 2023, there have been several times when we had parents send us emails. We get parents' emails all the time, people asking questions. And sometimes the people are like very articulate and have a really great question and something that we think is relevant to lots of families. And so that's happened twice. And we actually recently, and we've actually have responses from the people who asked those questions who, so it's been interesting. So we wanted to share the responses.
Yeah, because, we do this work, what we believe is hopefully encouraging and inspiration and practical. But really the hope here is that families are taking these ideas and maybe making it your own, adjusting it, modifying it. But it's bearing fruit in your family life, that you have a stronger marriage, that you're more effective in your parenting, that you have more confidence or what have you. And so we did an episode here, and I'm just going to pull this up here. We did an episode, MFP 231, which was Teens and the Moody Blues. And it was great to have the mom
who asked the original question.
Said, Thank you so much for your response. We implemented your advice right away and have had great results. Our daughter is getting along great with her dad and seems to be handling her mood swings much better. I finally got to listen through the whole podcast. It was so good. I'm so happy that you used my question. Your advice, as usual, is spot on.
Yay! And that's always good to hear.
It's encouraging because, we don't share these things out of some kind of theoretical wisdom.
Yeah.
Our only claim to any kind of fame of any sort is that we have 10 kids and we've seen a lot. That doesn't mean we're perfect,
right?
But we try to offer some insights we've earned through the mistakes that we've made, and also some of the insights we've gained.
Right.
We steal every good idea we have from somebody else. We learned it from others, right? And we want you to learn from us as well as make it your own. And so it was really encouraging to hear that. Now, if you're curious what was our advice for that couple,
go back and listen to the podcast.
Go back in Messy Family 231 about teens and moody blues. Daughter who was having some challenges there that it changed the whole perspective for both the parents and for the daughter. And we did
another podcast about affording another child. And, it was in response again to someone who emailed us. And so we had not that same person, but somebody else wrote in to thank us for doing that podcast. And I just want to read to you so you can be encouraged as well. She said, "We want to thank you so much for putting this episode out there. It has been a massive answer to our prayers. Over the last couple years, we have searched everywhere for resources that articulate this radical openness to life in a way that's challenging but doesn't oversimplify the hardships people are dealing with. Due to the nature of this topic, there's no clear-cut answer to what is grave and what is not. But we found your podcast episode to be much needed, in-depth conversation that really questions the motives behind abstaining and challenges our deeply rooted beliefs of the value of a human soul in a charitable way." And then they thanked us for having Jonathan and Amanda on and the resources that they have and the other things that we pulled in. But just like to close, they said they felt like people's wounds and life problems were treated with reverence and love. Thank you so much for your witness and your willingness to tackle more difficult issues. You're truly changing lives, and it's only deepened our gratitude for your ministry and reinforced our decision to support you. Please know of our continued prayers. Yeah. So that kind of encouragement, especially when it's topics that are delicate and that are not clear cut. I really did appreciate that couple.
That's so great. And I just to put it out there, this is, again, as a reminder, this is what we do. This is our work. We have a small team. We're the two of us, and we have 4 other people who work with us in some capacity, 1 other full-time employee and 3 other kind of part-time folks. We are dedicated to families. And when you send in a question, we try to take it very seriously and reply. Now, again, we get lots of emails, so we can't reply to every single one with as much depth, but it really helps us see what's going on in your heart and your mind. And when you have something that happens, meaning something in our podcast resonates and you try something new, and we'd love to hear from you. Oh my gosh, absolutely. That would be not only just encouraging, but it also would enable us to share that with others. Because we believe we have this platform not for ourselves, but for everybody, right? That this is an opportunity for us to collaborate as parents. We're in this together. And when you find something that really was effective, that you applied some principle that we shared or talked about or resource, please share that with us. We'd love to echo that and encourage other folks. Okay. Let's get to today's topic.
Recap. So recap the last episode. So this is kind of like going along. This is
continuation of our last topic, our last episode 239. Again, talking about the big topic of obedience and discipline and what that looks like.
Right.
And so
kind of laying that foundation for discipline as an act of love.
Right.
Using the prodigal son and the father in that parable as our model.
Right. And so getting to that recognition that discipline is an act of love. Those 3 items that I kind of just said, this is when you think about discipline, 1, you need to stay calm, don't lose your cool. 2, you need to have a plan, a united plan that you trust.
Yeah.
And then you just need to follow through. I mean, that's really the essentials of it. But we talked about last time, some of the basics that you need as a parent
Right.
And then we talked about that united plan. It's basically having confidence, not that you're perfect, not that you've got it all figured out, but that you have a confidence. So when you approach your child, you're not just shooting from the hip. You're not just trying to put out fires.
Right.
You actually have something that you and your spouse are united in to approach that together and act with confidence. Even if it's an imperfect plan, you're acting with a level of confidence and humility with that.
And then you have boundaries that you've agreed upon with your spouse. These are the things that we're going to enforce. These are the things, and every family is different. Actually, when we just were watching our granddaughters this afternoon, and one of them had crawled onto the table and was sitting there, and she was just like kind of like because her sisters were like playing a little game with buttons, and so she crawled onto the table, and I was looking at her and I was kind of thinking, you know what?
Right now, I'm not going to worry about it.
Let that go. They're like totally, but for some people that may be a boundary. Absolutely not. You don't do, everybody's different. So, but you have to know what your boundaries are and agree on them with your spouse. And then the last thing is really affirmation. You need to delight in your child and then communicate that delight to them. And that will help them receive the direction that you have to give them better. And it changes your own heart too.
Right.
It helps your heart to be soft towards your child. So we're going to get into this episode about how do you make up that plan with your spouse.
And we wanted to put those kind of those elements out there because this is a continuation of both of a topic, but it's also important to have that foundation because particularly as we ended that idea of affirmations, how important that is. And the maxim that we really stand by is the rules without relationship breed rebellion.
Yeah.
But as you said, today we want to go into both a little bit more into kind of figuring out how do we get to that united plan, and some practicals that just to drive us down to that. So
we thought to make this plan, we would give you some questions. So each part of this, like are different points in making your plan. We thought it would be helpful if we phrase it in terms of a question. So you can kind of like go through these questions, and ideally with your spouse and think about it and then come up with something together.
Because I'm going to say not just ideally, right? Obviously if you are a single parent, then this will look a little different, but so we're orienting this towards you as a couple, and it will make sense even in the first question we ask. This is about how do we get to a unified plan? Because if we were saying you have to have confidence in your plan, well, how do we get this plan? Because we have a whole discipline guide on our site. Download that free resource for you. But we want to break down these questions.
Okay, so first question you may want to ask yourself is, what does my spouse think about this behavior? And the reason that is such an important question is because you are not God.
That's right.
You cannot see from all different vantage points, okay? So to have one other person who loves your child just as much as you do, who has a different perspective.
That's right.
And especially there's so many reasons for different perspective, different ways of being raised, different personality types. But one of the most important differences is that you're a mom and a dad.
That's right.
And so dads may see their son's behavior very differently than moms do. And moms may see daughters' behavior differently than than the fathers do.
Right.
So really the first thing is, what do they think about it? What is their perspective? What are they bringing in? And don't ask that like in a way of like trying to convince each other that you're right.
Yeah.
But just think about your child is like a diamond, right? And that you are kind of like looking at it. You're looking at it from different vantage points and those different facets of the diamond, right? That you're both trying to see at the same time.
And you said this by implication, but I'm just going to draw it out a little bit. Is the simple fact that this is where we do get tripped up. This is where some spouses have disagreements and arguments over the different approach. Don't fall into that trap, or try not to fall into that trap. Because,
or don't think I don't want to talk to my spouse because we're going to fight about it.
Right. And
that's a trap.
Because you do need to hear their perspective and first appreciate that they're coming from that different vantage point, that there is a beauty to complementarity, but those differences can lead to division if you allow it, if you don't see with respect that there's a different perspective. And when you're in the heat of the moment, those differences are accentuated, and they can be an argument ready to
Right.
explode. And so that's why we're saying out of the heat of a moment that you're sitting down and saying, okay, let's talk about this and stand shoulder to shoulder with your spouse, looking out. You said
At
the
your
diamond
family. Yeah.
as opposed to looking at a problem. I like the diamond, right? We're looking at the diamond together and we're seeing a fuller picture.
Yeah. And just to kind of use the example of like the little one sitting on the table, maybe mom is like, I really have no problem with that. And dad is like, absolutely never, that is not allowed in this house. And so when that happens, your follow-up to that should be, why? Tell me, why do you feel that way? Because your first response shouldn't be, well, this is what I think. And you shouldn't first explain yourself, right? Always seek first to understand. Seek first to understand. That is the best way. So then you get that synergy. The two of you can come up with something, an idea that is much better than either one of you would have thought with on your own. But it's really, you want to find out, why do you feel so strongly about that? And sometimes whoever feels more strongly about it, because some things you may be like, it doesn't really bother me, but if you feel really strongly about it, okay.
Let's talk about it.
All right, let's talk about that, and let's do that.
And thinking of this scenario, right? Let's just say women are more oriented toward relationships. They are more tuned in to maybe where the kids are at relationally. And then you throw an extra added that, let's say their mom is at home or at home more than the dad. And so she's around the kids more. She has more sensitivity to it, but she also is getting a little worn down. Maybe there were 20 different times where she was correcting, and maybe the dad, and I'm not saying this like this ever happened to us, but the dad would float in fresh in a way from work, having not dealt with the kids all day long, and looks out and is like, What? Why did this happen? Why didn't that happen? Mom,
why did you tolerate this?
Why did you let this happen? And either getting mad at mom or coming down so hard, that this creates this friction between mom and dad, and unnecessarily so, because both of them have a good perspective. Doesn't mean one is right and one is wrong.
Always recognize that everybody's And
I think that coming to this and seeing what your spouse's perspective requires you to get out of yourself, to see it from their vantage point. So using that situation, say mom was home longer or all day with the kids, and she is worn down, she is spent, and so she picked some of her battles. And some of them weren't the ones that dad would have chosen. Or it's like, well, hey, wait a second here. No Monday morning quarterbacking. You can't come in after the fact. But you can recognize that, well, maybe mom needs some encouragement. Maybe dad needs some, different vantage point. Both of you need to sit down and kind of say, okay, let's have a glass of wine and discuss this a little bit.
And one thing too about the difference between moms and dads is also how our children respond to us. Because I think there have been plenty of times when I would be getting in an argument with my teenage daughters and I would walk away and I'd look at Mike and I'd say, you need to deal with this. I cannot, because I am too emotional. I am too mad. I am too close, and those are those moments when I'm just like, I'm so grateful that these girls have two parents, because I just can't do this right now. And kind of knowing your own limitations and recognizing that sometimes, each one has a different gifts that they bring to the table. Sometimes for moms, it is that more relational, that they can kind of like come and talk about a discipline issue with the child, especially an older child on one level. But sometimes kids just need a strong wall, And sometimes that wall, sometimes it's mom, but sometimes that's dad coming in with that calm authority of like, this is not happening. Do you understand me, my son? Like that kind of thing. Sometimes that's what kids need. So, and children are so different, and where they are at in their stage of life is also different. So that's why spouses need to continue to communicate, because you both bring those gifts to the table.
Yeah. And I don't remember if we did it in the last episode, because we talk about this so often, but the whole ignore, explode, that sometimes there are, stealing it from a
good doctor.
But the idea that sometimes dads have allow things to let go, and then come down too hard. And sometimes mom can react and want to protect the kids. And which then disrespects the dad, throwing more gas on the fire, and it creates more of this friction, right?
Right.
Where in reality, they both have a point. And again, that's generalizations. Knowing in your situation, it might be the actual opposite, right?
Sure.
But when we are approaching things with it's my way or the highway, or I experience, because a lot of people, well, we'll get into this more, but knowing there are differences, basically, both that we're approaching this, we need to be at the heart saying, we want to do better than our ideas on our own.
Yeah.
For our kids need something that we can only create together as a mom and a dad. We're not simply compromising. We're listening to each other so as to create something that we couldn't have done on our own.
So I always think when it comes to this unity, I don't know, I've never said this on the podcast, I don't think. I always think about the sitcom, Everybody Loves Raymond.
Everybody loves Raymond.
Because you guys should watch old reruns of that. First of all, we used to watch it when it came out, and there was this thing, it's kind of weekly TV. We'd have to wait for the
TV,
program, live
TV,
you know. But anyway, when we were first married, we used to watch that every week. But they do kind of like the opposite of this. It's always Deborah, the mom, is always like, well, in the books, it says to do this and blah, 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 blah. And then, the dad, Ray, is like, it was like, it doesn't matter. Or kind of like an old, like more like salt of the earth type of response, like, old, whatever. What's the word I'm looking for? Like the common way of raising children, at the time, old school. And they did, it was funny because they did show sometimes Deborah's right, sometimes Ray is right. But at the end of the day, it really needs to be the two of you together.
And oftentimes in the sitcom, they would end up there.
Yeah, no, it's really good. So, okay. So next question to ask yourself, does this child have the capacity to do what I'm asking them to do?
That's actually a big question.
So I will give you an example. Whenever we have couples who we're mentoring, who will, ask us a question and say, all right, here we have this child who is exhibiting this behavior and they don't seem to be listening at all. And that we just had a conversation with somebody about this recently. They don't listen to anything I say. Everything they do, they push back. Usually my first question after asking, what does your spouse think about this, is do they do this at school?
Right.
Do they do this at school? Do they do this in their sports teams, in their sports practices? Because if the answer is no, they don't, they're actually very obedient at school and they exhibit this behavior at home, then they have the capacity. The problem is kind of with you, mom and dad. Like
or
you're
at least
the one,
you or the environment or something in that mix.
But in other words, the problem is something that you are doing. They don't have correct boundaries with you because, and we have also had this happen.
That's right.
Where the parents say, actually, my child who is 6, 7, 8, they are exhibiting this behavior at school. They exhibit this behavior no matter where they go.
Across the board.
Consistently.
Right. And that means it's either an age appropriateness or it's a capacity that they just simply don't have.
So why that is important is that may be a flag for some kind of a mental disorder, an emotional disorder, some kind of diagnosis where you may want to go and seek professional advice.
Or again, and that depends on the severity or the issues that we're talking about, right? But it could also just be, maybe I'm asking too much. Maybe this is your first child and nobody their age is actually doing what
No, because if they're doing it at school, that people at school are asking them different things than you are asking them at home. But if they are disobedient all the time, they never listen to anybody, I think that then is a problem. That's a problem that child does not have that capacity to obey in these times. So that we would put aside if someone said that to us, so we'd be like, okay, that's above our pay grade. you need to go.
It may or may not be, but you should probably actually pursue some.
Right. And that's the kind of that's when you talk to teachers and other professionals. But so putting that aside, if they say, and most people do say, they are very good at school. They're good at their friends' houses.
Right.
They're good everywhere. It's just with me that they don't know how to listen. Okay. So that's when you as a parent have to say, am I asking too much?
Right. Am I asking too much? Is there something in the environment? Is there some lack of clarity in the boundaries that I have drawn?
Right.
Because now you've localized it, because that's what we're trying to do is distinguish, is this a problem of the child, of the environment, of you and the rules?
Right.
And so by eliminating the fact that, okay, they are able to listen to other people's instructions.
They
are
can
able,
do it
They
when
have
they
that
want to.
capacity. So it's a
Yeah.
question of, are we putting too much demands? Are we not putting enough expectations? Are we not,
And
having
the
the
answer
proper?
isn't always, yes, I'm asking too much. Sometimes you may be like, I am definitely not asking too much. And we're going to give you some more questions too.
Yeah.
But it's really good to recognize that when we say too much,
What is that?
I
Yeah.
want parents to think about what is going on with that child and think about the day of a child, especially if they're in school. Okay. They have their entire day where people are telling them what to do. Go here, sit down, stand up, go in this line, go in that line, all day. And then when they come home, if parents are then like, you're going to play with one thing, you need to put it away immediately. Come over here, set the table, do your chores, do this. It's like, my gosh, sometimes kids just need to be left alone.
Right.
Like, when do they get the chance?
The kids, the stress and anxiety of children has risen over the last number of years.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of context to that, but it's like the busyness of kids and the demands on them are growing.
Yeah. And I think that we have to ask ourselves, what are we asking them to do? Because one way to lessen the power struggles you have with your child,
Step back.
Yeah. Be like, I'm not going to die on this hill. I'm just getting off the hill. And there is no hill. You know, it's like if I'm fighting, like just use the child on the table example again, like if I'm spending my entire day, this child keeps crawling on the table and I take them down, crawl on the table, get them down. I'm punishing them and they call us and they say, my kid keeps crawling on the table no matter what I do. I would say, how important is this really? Is this really that important? Because if it's not, it seems that you are getting totally worn out and your child is getting worn out and you're damaging your relationship fighting over this one little thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes just
don't
be
die
like,
on that hill.
That's not the hill to die on.
So asking too much also makes me think of asking the right things, right? Meaning lessen, as you're saying, the things that we're asking of them. Maybe not, you eliminate the big stuff, but maybe you look at it and say, I want to get more things that are easy for them to say yes to.
Yeah.
We want to create an environment where it's easy to do good.
Right.
Exactly. And so really think at that environment. Think about how the rules you've established, few but important, but that are easy for them so that you get them to say yes in obedience to things that they want to do, that you want to orient them towards that, right? Because particularly when they're young, we've said this before, but particularly when they're young, we're talking about behaviors and we want them to do the right thing. We want to get the habit of that behavior going down. So when you recognize, hey, they're already inclined this way. I think we talked about it last episode, right? The idea of virtue, that you focus in on virtues they already are naturally exhibiting, naturally oriented towards building strength on that.
Right.
So then you can go, or maybe we talked about another podcast, but that's the idea here, is that we want to build a muscle of discipline and obedience, and don't feel like you need to, for a 8-year-old to be demanded of some high mark.
Yeah.
Start with where they're at and then build off of that. Building the growth is more important than they hit the mark today, because we're playing the long game as parents, right? We have to see the marathon. We have to see, we don't have a ton of time because 18 years is not a long time. Especially when you're probably listening to this, your child's, whatever. And so, but you build on the strengths that already exist and work slowly off of that. So then I'm not giving them whiplash by changing, and I'm not weighing them down too much, and moving forward there.
So kind of like going off of that, another thing to ask is, and I kind of alluded to this already, is what's really going on?
Yeah, the bigger picture.
And when Dr. Dobson talks about this, about seeing through the eyes of the child, seeing the situation through the eyes of the child. One thing I would love, I would say, if I had $1 million, this is what I would do for the Messy Family Project. I would love to do a series of videos that show the parallels to help parents see situations through the eyes of their child. So
meaning adult situations that would happen in a kid's world.
Picture so here's video, the shot opens. There is somebody sitting at a computer, typing something, and they're completely focused and there's things going on around them, but you can tell they are very, very intent on what you're doing. Then all of a sudden, somebody else walks over, rips the computer away, and then the person's like, what are you doing? I can't believe you just did that. And they start yelling at the other person. Then it goes to a toddler. And a toddler is sitting there in front of a wall with a crayon, drawing on the wall. And they're very intent about doing exactly
and destroying
what.
your wall in the process.
They're destroying your wall in the process. But to them, they are working just as intently and just as diligently as an adult will be sitting there working on a computer.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, an adult comes over, rips the crayon out of their hand and starts screaming at them. Think about that. If that is what I mean by seeing through the eyes of your child, there is so much they don't know. There's so much they don't know. There's so much that they have to learn. And so we have got to try to come at them with that sense of compassion and really think to yourself, are they hungry, right?
That's right. That's
are
right.
they tired? Are they overwhelmed?
What's going on in the context of their, because
Yes.
for them, particularly young, they haven't figured out how to manage their emotions. Maybe there's a bunch of stuff at school that happened that day. Maybe there's a bunch of stuff with their friends, and not that changes the desire to
Right.
always do the right thing. We're not saying you give them a pass on everything, but taking in that context
Very
might
important.
allow you to approach them differently. Like if you knew an adult had just lost their wife, in a tragic accident, you would approach them differently if they were your checking you out at the grocery store.
Or if you knew a mom who is just about ready to have a baby, she just moved, she already has 3 little kids. Would you demand it? No, you would be like, oh, you forgot to send a thank you card. You know what? Don't worry about it. It's really fine. Or you forgot to, call somebody that you're supposed to call this responsibility. It's okay. Like our kids have situations like that in their lives that may be just as burdensome because of their developmental level as like that young mom in that situation.
And we're not saying in every situation you're just going to ignore their behavior, but we are saying taking in that context will make you approach them differently, which leads to our next question. Can you ignore this behavior? Right. So again, we're not saying to ignore bad behavior. We're not saying to ignore the formation. This is your God-given responsibility, right? But what we are saying is that you don't have to fight every battle, and you do not have to wage a war, if you will. Kids do things in our home sometimes just to get attention.
Absolutely.
They just
say
looking
things to get attention.
They say things provocatively, and they may just again, sometimes we just get exasperated with all the questions of a toddler, but oftentimes they want to relate like an adult. And so they think that's what adults do. They just have these conversations through questions and stuff.
Exactly.
So there are times when you're looking at a discipline, again, these are our questions for discernment. Can you just say, I'm okay, just not worrying about this one. I'm gonna focus over here. Now, again, safety. I mean, there are some criteria where like you can never ignore safety, moral, big issues. However, there are times when you look at it and say, okay, again, the context may help you recognize, okay, you know what? This is what he was going for. This is his desire. Yeah, it wasn't the right path, wasn't the right choice, but.
Right. And the reason that we say this is because when I was a young mom, I didn't ignore anything.
I know.
I did not follow this advice. And you can wear yourself out because you think, you know why?
Yeah.
Because you look at your 2 or 3 year old and you're like, if I allow this, then they will grow up to be an axe murderer.
Yes. You're playing this out.
Exactly. You play. This is the way. Maybe this is the way moms, brains works. But I'm like, if I allow them to push their sister, then they're going to grow up and they're going to think that pushing is good.
And then they're going to be a drug pusher.
Exactly. Or they're going to be pushing people in front of cars or whatever. And now, having been a mom for a very long time, I realize that's not true.
That's right.
There is one stage of learning that happens when they're 2 or 3. Then there's another stage. Then there's another stage. Then there's another stage. There's a lot of time for kids to learn certain things, and you don't have to bang out every defect in the metal right now.
So we hope right now you're taking a little sigh of relief.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I don't have to correct every single behavior. You shouldn't. You don't want to be in a position. There's another reason why you shouldn't do it, right? Because you don't want to be in a situation where all you're doing is correcting your child.
Absolutely.
Right? That would be the worst kind of discipline out there.
Absolutely.
Again, that's why we started the whole thing, or, affirmation, the whole idea of boundaries and how this is an act of love, because discipline is that act of love. And sometimes ignoring some of those behaviors, again, that are just inconsequential and that you don't have to fight. And some of it may be based on the fact that you're just worn out. And that if you do respond, it might come out wrong.
Right.
However, if it's at a situation where you're ignoring, and it's building up inside of you,
right,
that's actually dangerous.
Right.
So I want to distinguish between the ignoring that we want. It's like, hey, you don't have to fight every battle. And when we sometimes see someone heading down the wrong path, something that I like doing is distracting them from going too far.
Yes.
Instead of putting a harsh beat down, if you will, but simply say, through conversation, through humor, I distract them from what may have been, heading down this path of doing wrong, of lying. Let's just use lying as an example, right? We are pretty confident they're lying. We don't know they're lying, but we have a high suspect. Mm-hmm. Maybe this isn't the point to die on that hill. And maybe instead of tripping them up and getting them, trapping them, kind of making them
interrogating them
so that they feel like they're defending their reputation, their honor, and they're covering up for their previous cover up. And maybe you just distract with a conversation and you go in an entirely different direction.
Right.
And by humor, by conversation, you move them there and you distract them and you stop them from going down the wrong path even further.
So, or another example would be if you hear two children starting to get into a fight and it's starting to escalate, like if you're in the car or something like that.
Perfect example.
Then you can always break in and be like, hey guys, this weekend, we're planning on going to a park and blah, blah, blah. And hey, didn't you the other day see blah, blah, blah? Or hey guys, go look at that squirrel, or whatever. Whatever it is, sometimes just kind of breaking in and changing the tenor of what is happening really, really helps. And so that's part of like ignoring the conversation or ignoring the behavior. Because the thing is that if you call attention to it, like the lying, for example, if you call attention to it and you say, you know what, I think you're lying to me right now, you are forcing yourself to deal with that.
You have been backed into a corner in some ways because you can't walk away from that once you call attention to it.
Exactly. And you have to do it. And if you don't have the energy or if you don't have the capacity to deal with it right then, you're making a mistake. Because this is going to not turn out well. And so, or if your kids are fighting in the other room and you call and you're like, listen, you're both talking to each other this way, then you have to deal with that. And you have to go in, well, he did this first, well, she did blah, 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 all of that. You know what? Sometimes it's better just break the tension, distract them, move on. There's other things that you can do with them to help build the relationship other than in a positive sense, other than the negative. Don't talk to each other like this. I don't want to hear, so kind of you can say, hey, why don't the three of us go get ice cream or blah, 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 whatever, And
kind of building off of that positivity, if you will, or that positive direction. The next question is, can I allow them to exercise their will in an appropriate way or more appropriate way, right? So looking at your discipline and saying, okay, what if there are fun ways that I can get them to exercise, developing the habit of obedience and saying yes. And so we have games that are oriented towards them following the rules, being obedient, simple things like Simon Says, red light, green light,
right?
Where they have to listen, they have to pay attention, they have to, and the rules are
instant obedience,
right? and a game that I love playing is the instructions game. I'm fairly confident somebody else has already created this game. And if not, let's trademark it right now. Could my lawyer figure that out? But the instructions game, right? Really, really complicated, is a dad get into a very comfortable chair. Could be mom, but it's usually better if it's dad. Dad's
usually very tired.
Sit in a very comfortable chair and have his kids line up, and he gives them instructions of how to clean up the room. But he does it in such a way that the children have to, like, you take 3 ballerina pirouettes to pick up the fire truck, and then hop to the toy chest, and they have specific things, and but they love our kids. Just love it. They eat it up. They can we do the instructions game? Can we do? And it's simply because they're being given instructions, so they're learning how to follow rules. And they're
a little bit of a challenge.
Little bit of a challenge. And again, that's for toddlers and up. And but it's a fun way to slowly develop. And there's other great ways, right? To kind of make it almost, did we say this last time? Gamify, obedience and discipline training.
Well, one thing too to do with older kids who are having a hard time. So maybe your kid is not a toddler. Maybe they're a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old, and they really have a problem with self-control. They really have a problem with controlling their emotions. One of the things that we did with some of our children who had a hard time with that is encourage their work with animals. So doing horseback riding lessons or caring for horses, because you have to follow certain rules. You have to have self-control.
When you said this, I was like, really? The animals, and I'm like, the self-control, the discipline, and then, but there's another part of this. I'm sorry to cut you off. Just like the idea of the care for animals, that these are fragile living things, right? That require care and attention and kind of a sense of sensitivity. So if you have a child who is who has trouble pushing somebody or not being gentle, not being careful, well, giving them an animal
like a hamster or a snake or an animal that you have to be very gentle with, and you have to be stay very calm with, or they get upset.
Tell them about Claire's.
Oh yeah. So our daughter Claire has a bearded dragon, and that's a whole other story in itself, which is very funny. But a bearded dragon, what's really interesting is that when they are happy, they actually change color. They get like white and have like orange around them. And when they're sad or they're stressed, they get very dark. And so like a dark gray. So it's interesting to see, and she is, a little bit of ADD. She's very, very jumpy. To see her, because it's like a game. Like, how can we calm and, because they have very sensitive hearing, bearded dragons.
They do.
And so, how can we how can we get the colors, as positive as possible and not stress out?
Yeah, because
this animal, this reptile.
I was fascinated that the
it's interesting to watch.
Reptile changes color based upon its mood. It's like a mood ring, basically.
It's like a living mood ring, exactly. But then there's also other ways that they can exercise their will. For example, just like that of the classic giving your child choices, giving your toddler choices. Like you can wear the red shirt or the blue shirt, or you can put on your shoes or I can put on your shoes, but they have to choose.
But it's a choice that
one way or
ends
another.
Up either way with what you want accomplished. They're getting dressed, they're getting their shoes on, they're, whatever the situation is.
And another thing too, that I always think when a child is doing something, especially a child who's very young, like a toddler, say they are constantly throwing things, like our grandson Mateo is constantly throwing things. What needs to be done is say, this child obviously has a need to learn this skill.
Right.
How can we enable him to learn that in an appropriate way? Can we give him bean bags? Can we give him Nerf balls? Can we give him styrofoam balls? Can we set up a little basketball thing, Or if you have a child who is constantly making a mess with water, well, how can we set up an appropriate water play for them to do that? Because especially when they're very young, they have this need.
Right. It's a developmental need. Right.
Yeah. How can you satisfy that need in an appropriate way? Instead of just saying, stop doing that. Why are you doing that? Don't. Instead say, hey, do this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Redirecting, focusing.
Exactly.
And really flowing from this. I feel like they're kind of just like flowing right one into the other. Last real question I think that we'd ask, just as you're looking at discernment, again, is thinking about the positive reinforcements. How can I reward their good behavior? And again, that doesn't, you can't always do that. We know that doesn't come into every situation, but you want to look at it and say, how do I make sure?
Do it as much as possible.
Yeah. We want to be in a position where we're saying yes and we're getting them to say yes as often as possible.
So tell them the Maeve and the lemonade.
Did we talk about this last time? I can't remember.
I don't think so.
All right. So here was a situation where my granddaughter wanted lemonade. And I don't know if you have any toddlers.
She's 3. Yeah.
She's 3. And but the demands were quiet and kept getting louder and pretty more insistent. And she broke down crying, I think, when I said
she was
no.
yelling at you.
Or she was yelling at me. I can't remember. And I did. We were about to have dinner. I didn't really think it was a good time.
There was like a lot going on.
And I'm usually the good guy. I don't like being the bad guy, but I was like, I don't think it's a good thing right now. And then she lost it, and she was like, bah, bah, bah. And maybe she was saying bad papa, and she didn't say that, but it was something, that was kind of the vibe.
She was mad at you.
Yeah, she was mad at me. And so I looked at her, and I had a click. Okay, I'm in obedience training or discipline. Even though I'm not her father, I think it was appropriate to say, honey, you can't cry when you don't get what you want. Now, if you ask with a smile, and you ask politely, and you say, please, then Papa will listen to you. And so she changed, and then I got out the smallest cup.
And she said, can I please have some lemonade?
And then I wanted to be able to say yes, right? At that point. Because
how discouraging would that have been if Maeve is like, I pulled myself together, I got my emotions in line, and I got out, may I please have some lemonade? And Papa was like, no.
I still wanted to say no.
That would have been so mean.
But I knew that it would be wrong. So I took out a cup, and I put in the smallest amount of lemonade that was reasonably possible. And I said, and this is it until dinner.
Right.
And so she got that. We're closing the books on this, requests. All requests will be denied.
But see, the point is that some people may feel like it's an all or nothing thing. No, I can't compromise. If I say no, I just have to stick to no, because then they will always be whatever. And I don't think it's not as black and white as that.
It isn't.
It's really not. Sometimes to get the child to calm down and to experience the reward for doing the right thing, sometimes we have to say, okay, if you ask me nicely, then I'm going to listen to you. And then if they do, and they show they've exercised that muscle, they've exercised that self-control, and then you say, you know what? I have changed my mind. I will give you, and
you're
like you
winning
said,
them over to the forces of light and goodness.
Exactly.
By saying yes.
And we kind of had said to this before too, of the environment of you want to make it easy for them to do good.
Yes.
You want to make it easy for them to do good. And so sometimes, you just let them sit on the table if it's not a big deal. Sometimes you just say, you know what, they just made a mess in that room, and I am not going to press it right now because I don't want to fight that battle of getting that room to clean up. Sometimes if you're going to be black and white, any mess my child makes, they have to clean it up themselves to a point, because they make 100 messes in a day. If they clean up one, I personally would count that as a victory, and then, but you can ask them, invite them in, because you know what else you can do is sometimes people just have too many toys.
Yes.
There's too much stuff around. If you're tired of your kids dumping out the toys all over the place,
then stop.
Great idea. Put out 3 toys. Yeah. And you can even say to them, you're constantly dumping out your toys. And so you know what? Instead of having 20 dinosaurs in here, I'm just going to put out 3.
Right.
And 9 times out of 10, they're pretty fine with that. And then you can even say, hey, when you learn to put away those 3, I'll give you some more. But that's those natural consequences, because sometimes kids' worlds are already so overwhelming to them.
Yeah.
And we have to recognize that less is more. Simplify.
And if there's any ways to catch them doing good, sometimes we as parents are, or the kids at least feel like we're just seeing them at the worst moments, or they just screwed up. And this goes again for little guys all the way through, to find them doing good. Like we had a child who did an excellent job cleaning up the kitchen. And comparatively, it was such a huge improvement. I mentioned it then, and I brought it up the next day. And I could tell they were actually really proud.
Yeah.
And
as they should be.
And so finding opportunities to not only say yes to your kids, but also be kind of catching them and praising them for doing the good. All right.
Okay. We could talk about discipline forever. Gosh. We should probably do a whole course on discipline.
We were happy to respond to any questions, follow-ups, desires for more specifics. Happy to go there. We also obviously had previous podcasts that we've done on discipline. I'm thinking of like first time obedience. I can't remember the podcast, but we've done a number of topics here.
And go download our discipline guide.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Messyfamilyproject.org. We have a guide to discipline with suggested podcasts and worksheets that you can do with your spouse to kind of like help come up with this plan.
Yeah. Okay. So do you want to close this in prayer?
Sure. In the name of the Father and Son of the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, we just thank you for these families. We thank you for their children. We thank you for giving us a loving heart towards our children, Lord God. Help us to be inspired by your Holy Spirit to know how to really exercise discipline as that act of love. Help us, Lord, to really love our children and form them and be a good steward of the souls that you have given us. Lord, in your name we pray.
Amen. Amen. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. And again, if you want to sign up for the Play and Pray Challenge, whether it is May, June, or sometime later, you can always sign up. It's always worth doing. Messyfamilyproject.org. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.